My name is Elena Hartwell. I'm 29 years old, and 6 months ago I died. Well, technically, the machines kept me alive while my parents stood in the ICU and told the doctors I wasn't worth saving. She's not really our daughter, they said. We don't owe her anything. Then they walked away, leaving me to face death alone. But they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated how much fight was left in me. And when they showed up 3 weeks later with my perfect sister to claim the inheritance my grandmother left me, they found something waiting that would destroy everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and consequences. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I made sure they paid for every moment of neglect, every lie, and every ounce of conditional love they ever gave me. I grew up in what everyone called the perfect family. We lived in an elegant Tudor-style house in Greenwich, Connecticut, complete with manicured gardens and a circular driveway. My father, David Hartwell, was a prominent investment banker. My mother, Catherine, was the epitome of high society charity, galas, country club committees, and designer everything. And then there was my sister Victoria, 2 years younger than me, with golden hair that caught the light just right and a smile that could melt the coldest heart. From the outside, we had it all. Private schools, European vacations, writing lessons, piano recitals. The Hartwells were Connecticut royalty, and everyone knew it. But behind the perfectly painted facade, there was a truth that took me 27 years to fully understand. I was never meant to be part of this picture. My earliest memory of feeling different was when I was 7 years old. Victoria had broken Mother's favorite crystal figurine while playing dress-up in the living room. When Mother discovered the shattered pieces, she found me carefully trying to glue them back together. "Elena, what have you done?" she gasped, her voice filled with that particular disappointment reserved just for me. "Victoria broke it," I said simply. "I was trying to fix it. Where is Victoria now?" "Upstairs crying. She's scared you'll be mad." Mother's expression softened, but not toward me. "Poor darling. She must feel terrible." She knelt beside me, taking the broken pieces from my small hands. "Elena, you shouldn't have touched this. Now it's completely ruined." I watched as she threw the pieces away without another word about Victoria's role in breaking it. That night at dinner, there was no mention of the incident. Victoria got extra dessert because she seemed sad, while I was reminded to be more careful around Mother's precious things. This became the pattern of our lives. Victoria was the sun around which our family orbited, and I was a distant planet, cold and largely ignored unless I stepped out of line. When Victoria struggled with math, she got a tutor and praised for every small improvement. When I brought home straight A's, it was expected. "Elena's always been academically inclined," Father would say dismissively, as if my achievements were just a quirk of nature rather than the result of desperate hard work to earn their attention. The differences were subtle but constant. Victoria got the bigger bedroom with the bay window overlooking the garden. I got the smaller room facing the neighbor's fence. Victoria's artwork covered the refrigerator and hallway walls. Mine was quietly filed away in a folder marked Elena's school things. When Victoria wanted to quit piano after 2 months, they found her a different instrument. When I expressed interest in art classes, they reminded me that we didn't have room in the budget for non-essential activities, but it was the way they looked at us that hurt the most. When Victoria entered a room, their faces lit up with genuine joy and love. When I appeared, they acknowledged me with polite attention, the way you might greet a well-behaved houseguest. I learned to be invisible, to anticipate their needs, to excel quietly so as not to overshadow Victoria's more modest achievements. I was 15 when I first suspected the truth. We were at one of Mother's charity luncheons, and I was helping serve refreshments to the guests, a task Victoria was never asked to perform because she was too delicate for such work. I overheard Mother talking to her best friend, Helen. In the kitchen, "Victoria's becoming such a beauty," Helen commented. "She has David's eyes and your elegant bone structure." Yes, She's going to be stunning, Mother agreed. Thank goodness she inherited the best of both of us. And Elena? She's certainly accomplished, though she looks nothing like either of you. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. Elena is complicated, Mother finally said. But she's very self-sufficient. We never have to worry about her. Still, it must be wonderful having two daughters. Victoria is my heart, Mother replied, and I heard the unmistakable truth in her voice. She always has been. That night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, studying my reflection. Dark hair where theirs was light, hazel eyes where theirs were blue, sharp features where theirs were soft. I had always attributed these differences to genetics. Sometimes children look more like distant relatives, I told myself, but Mother's words echoed in my mind. Elena is complicated. I began paying closer attention to family conversations, to the way they discussed family history, to the photos displayed throughout our house. There were baby pictures of Victoria from the moment she was born, Mother holding her in the hospital, father cutting the umbilical cord, grandparents cooing over the newest family member. My baby pictures began when I was already several months old, and in every early photo, I looked uncomfortable in their arms, like they weren't quite sure how to hold me, but it was my grandmother, Father's mother, who finally told me the truth. Grandma Rose lived in a beautiful brownstone in Manhattan, filled with books and antiques and the smell of jasmine tea. I visited her every other weekend, taking the train into the city by myself, another responsibility Victoria was deemed too young for, despite being only 2 years my junior. You're troubled, dear, Grandma Rose observed one Saturday afternoon. When I was 17, we were sitting in her conservatory, surrounded by her collection of orchids, just thinking about college applications. I lied. She studied me over her teacup. You know, you have your mother's eyes. I looked up sharply. Mother has blue eyes. Mine are hazel, not Catherine's eyes, dear. Your real mother's eyes. The teacup trembled in my hands. What do you mean, Grandma? Rose set down her cup with deliberate care. I've been waiting for this conversation for 17 years. I suppose it's time. She told me everything. How my biological mother, Sarah, had been Catherine's younger sister. How Sarah had gotten pregnant at 19 by a boyfriend who disappeared the moment he learned about the baby. How Catherine and David had been trying to conceive for 3 years without success. How Sarah had died in a car accident when I was 6 months old, and Catherine and David had agreed to adopt me. They thought it would be the perfect solution. Grandma Rose explained. Catherine would have the child she desperately wanted, and you would have a stable home with family. Then why? I couldn't finish the question. Why do they treat you differently? Grandma Rose's expression grew sad. Because 3 months after they brought you home, Catherine discovered she was pregnant with Victoria. Suddenly, they had 2 babies instead of 1, and only one felt truly theirs. Do they know that you know about my adoption? I insisted on it. I told them you had a right to understand your heritage, to know about Sarah. But she sighed. They thought it would be easier if you never knew. They wanted you to feel like their natural child. But I've never felt like their natural child, I whispered. I've always felt like I was auditioning for a role I could never quite land. I know, dear. I've watched, and it's broken my heart. They love you in their way, but it's different from how they love Victoria. It's careful love, conscious love. Victoria gets the unconscious, overwhelming love that parents have for their biological children. That conversation changed everything and nothing. I had answers, but the knowledge only made the daily reality more painful. Now I understood why I felt like an outsider in my own family, but understanding didn't make the feeling disappear. If anything, it intensified. Every interaction became filtered through this new lens of truth. I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities with renewed determination. If I couldn't be their natural daughter, I would be their most accomplished one. I graduated, valedictorian, got accepted to Columbia with a full scholarship, and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. I started my own tech company, developing security software for financial institutions. By the time I was 25, my company, SecureLink Technologies, was valued at $15 million. I lived in a sleek apartment in Soho, drove a Tesla, and was featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list. I thought success would finally earn me the recognition and love I'd always craved from my parents, but when the Forbes article came out, Victoria's reaction was what they focused on. She was in her surgical residency at Mount Sinai, working 100-hour weeks and barely scraping by on a resident's salary. Poor Victoria, mother sighed over Sunday dinner. She's working so hard, and here's Elena getting all this attention for her little computer business. It's not a little computer business, I said carefully. We have 47 employees and clients across 3 continents. Yes, dear, father said dismissively. But Victoria is saving lives. There's something noble about medicine that business simply doesn't have. That was the moment I realized that no amount of success would ever be enough. They would always find a way to diminish my achievements while elevating Victoria's. She was inherently valuable to them. I had to earn my worth over and over again, and the currency was never enough. I began distancing myself from family gatherings. I stopped calling every week. I sent polite birthday gifts and made brief appearances at major holidays, but I started building a life that didn't revolve around seeking their approval. I dated a wonderful man named Marcus, a fellow entrepreneur who understood my drive and ambition. I developed close friendships with my business partners and colleagues. I traveled, I learned new skills, I bought art that I loved regardless of whether it matched anything else. For the first time in my life, I began to understand what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than what I could achieve. But the universe has a way of testing our newfound independence. The accident happened on a Wednesday in February. I was driving back from a client meeting in Westchester, taking the familiar route along the Merritt Parkway that I'd traveled hundreds of times. It was late afternoon, that golden hour when the sun sits low and casts long shadows across the road. I remember adjusting my rearview mirror to block the glare. I remember thinking about the meeting, about the new contract we'd just signed, about the celebratory dinner I was planning with my team. I remember glancing at my phone to check the time. I don't remember the 18-wheeler that ran the red light at the Route 104 intersection. I don't remember the impact that sent my BMW spinning across 3 lanes of traffic. I don't remember the second collision with the guardrail, or the way my car crumpled like paper around me. What I do remember is waking up in what felt like a fog, unable to move or speak, but somehow aware of voices around me, beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic, and gradually, the understanding that I was in a hospital, and something was very, very wrong. Traumatic brain injury, a woman's voice was saying. The swelling was significant, but we've managed to reduce it with medication. She's in a medically induced coma to give her brain time to heal. What are her chances? A man's voice, clinical and detached. It's too early to say definitively. The next 72 hours will be critical. We'll know more once we start bringing her out of the coma and can assess cognitive function. I tried to open my eyes, to speak, to move any part of my body. Nothing responded. It was like being trapped in a prison made of my own flesh, conscious but completely unable to communicate that consciousness to the outside world. She's listed Catherine and David Hartwell as emergency contacts, another voice said. We've notified them. They should be here soon. Hope flickered in my chest. My parents were coming. Whatever our complicated relationship, surely they would advocate for me now. Surely this crisis would strip away all the careful emotional distance and reveal the fundamental love that must exist underneath. I don't know how long I waited in that strange twilight between consciousness and unconsciousness. Time moved differently there, measured not in minutes or hours but in the rhythm of machines breathing for me, in the cycles of voices coming and going, in the gradual awareness of pain that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When I finally heard their voices, it felt like salvation. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell. The doctor's voice was professional but warm. I'm Dr. Martinez, your daughter's attending physician. How is she? Mother's voice, tight with what I assumed was worry. Elena suffered severe trauma in the accident. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding that we've managed to control, and most significantly, a traumatic brain injury. We've induced a coma to reduce brain swelling, but she's stable now. What does that mean for her recovery? Father asked. Brain injuries are unpredictable. She could wake up completely normal, or there could be lasting effects. Cognitive impairment, personality changes, motor function issues. We won't know until we start bringing her out of the coma. There was a pause. I strained to hear something, anything, that would indicate their distress at my condition. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Mother finally asked. We're hoping to start reducing the sedation tomorrow, see how she responds. If all goes well, she could be conscious again within 48 to 72 hours, and if it doesn't go well, Father's voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing a business transaction, then we'll reassess. But let's stay optimistic. For now, would you like to see her? Is she conscious? Can she hear us? It's possible. Many coma patients report being aware of conversations around them. You should feel free to talk to her. I heard footsteps, the soft squeak of shoes on linoleum. Then they were there, beside my bed, and I waited for the words of comfort, the declarations of love, the promises that everything would be okay. She looks terrible, Mother said softly. Head injuries tend to cause significant swelling and bruising. Dr. Martinez explained. It looks worse than it is. How long will she be like this? Father asked. When will we know if there's permanent damage? As I said, we're hoping to begin consciousness protocols tomorrow. Are there other family members who should be notified? A spouse, boyfriend, close friends? She's not married, Mother replied. There's her sister Victoria, but she's in medical school. This would be very upsetting for her. I'm sure she'd want to know. Dr. Martinez said gently. We'll handle family notifications, Father said with finality. What we need to know now is what happens if she doesn't recover. What happens if she's impaired? The question hit me like a physical blow. Not concern for my well-being, not grief at my condition, but immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios and their implications. Mr. Hartwell, it's much too early for that kind of discussion. Your daughter is stable, and we have every reason to hope for a good recovery, but if she doesn't recover, Mother pressed. If she's not the same, what then? We have excellent rehabilitation programs, physical therapy, cognitive therapy, speech therapy if needed. Many patients with similar injuries go on to lead fulfilling lives. That's not what I'm asking, Father said, his voice taking on the sharp edge I remembered from childhood when he was frustrated with my inability to understand something he considered obvious. What I'm asking is about decision-making authority, about her affairs, her business, her assets. There was a long silence. When Dr. Martinez spoke again, her voice had cooled considerably. Mr. Hartwell, your daughter isn't even conscious yet. I think we should focus on her recovery before we discuss anything else. Of course, Mother said quickly. We're trying to understand all the possibilities. It's a lot to process, I understand. Why don't you spend some time with her? Talk to her. Even if she can't respond, she may be able to hear you. Footsteps again, then the sound of chairs being pulled close to my bed. This was it. This was when they would finally tell me they loved me. When the crisis would strip away all pretense and reveal the deep parental love that surely must exist. Elena, Mother said softly. Can you hear me, sweetheart? The endearment sent a thrill through me. She'd never called me sweetheart before. The doctors say you're going to be fine, she continued. You just need to rest and get better. Your mother's right, Father added. You're strong. You've always been strong. You'll get through this. For a moment, warmth flooded my chest. They did care. They were here. They were worried. The question is, Father continued, his voice dropping, What happens to SecureLink while you're incapacitated? Someone needs to make decisions, David, Mother warned quietly. I'm just saying, we need to be practical. Her business partners don't have legal authority to make major decisions. If she's going to be impaired long term, she'll recover, Mother said firmly. And when she does, she'll handle her own affairs. But what if she doesn't? Father's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the quiet room, I heard every word. What if this is it? What if she's going to be a vegetable? The casual cruelty of the word hit me like a slap. Not what if she needs long-term care, or what if she needs our help, but what if she's going to be a vegetable? David, stop. Mother's voice was sharp now. Someone might hear you. I'm just being realistic. Look at her, Catherine. Look at all those machines. This isn't our Elena anymore. This isn't the daughter who built that company, who was always so independent and capable. This is what? Mother demanded. This is a burden, he said quietly. And I'm not sure how much we're obligated to bear. The words landed in my consciousness like shards of glass. A burden. After 29 years of trying to prove I was worthy of their love, of striving to be the perfect daughter, of achieving everything I thought might finally make them proud, I had become a burden. She's still our daughter, Mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is she, though? Father's voice was thoughtful now, calculating. Really, Catherine? When was the last time we had a real relationship with her? She barely calls, barely visits. She's made it clear that she doesn't need us in her life. That doesn't mean we abandon her when she needs help. I'm not talking about abandoning her. I'm talking about being realistic about our obligations. She has insurance. She has money. She has that business partner who seems capable of handling things. We don't have to be the ones responsible for this. What are you saying, David? I'm saying maybe this is a natural ending point. Maybe this is where we step back and let other people handle the situation. Elena never wanted to be part of this family anyway. She's made that abundantly clear, David. Mother's voice was warning, but I could hear the consideration in it. She wasn't rejecting the idea outright. Think about it, Catherine. Really think about it. What has Elena ever given us besides stress and complications? She's never been grateful for anything we've done for her. She's always acted like we owed her something, like we weren't good enough parents because we didn't cater to her the way we did. Victoria, that's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time she called just to talk? When was the last time she seemed genuinely happy to see us? She treats us like obligations, like people she has to tolerate rather than parents she loves. And now we're supposed to drop everything and become her caregivers? I wanted to scream, to fight back against the revisionist history he was creating. I hadn't called because my calls were never welcome. I hadn't seemed happy to see them because their attention always came with conditions and criticisms. I had acted like they were obligations because that's exactly how they had treated me my entire life. Victoria would never forgive us, Mother said quietly. Victoria doesn't have to know the details. We tell her Elena is in good hands, that she's getting the best care possible, which she is. The hospital will take care of her medical needs, and her business associates can handle everything else. And if she recovers, if she wakes up and she's fine, then she goes back to her independent life, and we go back to ours. Nothing changes, and if she doesn't, there was a long pause. Then it's not our problem. The casual brutality of it took my breath away. They were discussing writing me off, like a bad investment, walking away from their daughter because taking care of me might be inconvenient. I need to think about this, Mother said finally. Don't think too long, Father replied. The longer we stay, the more involved we become. The more expectations people will have that we're going to be here for the long haul. What do I tell Victoria? Tell her Elena is stable and getting good care. Tell her the doctors are optimistic. Tell her we're monitoring the situation closely. None of that is technically untrue, but if she wants to visit, then we tell her it's too upsetting, that Elena wouldn't want her to see her like this. Victoria's in the middle of her residency. She doesn't have time to be sitting in hospital rooms anyway. They were planning to isolate me, to cut me off from anyone who might advocate for me. It was methodical, calculated, and absolutely in character. For everything I'd experienced growing up in their house, I should call Dr. Martinez, Mother said. Let her know our decision. What decision? Father asked carefully. That we're stepping back. That we're confident Elena is in good hands with the medical team and her business associates. That's wise, Catherine. Elena's always been independent. This is just respecting her independence, even unconscious, even helpless. I could hear them creating a narrative that made abandoning me sound like a kindness, like respect for my autonomy rather than what it actually was. A calculated decision to walk away when I needed them most. They stood to leave, and I waited for something, anything that would indicate regret or genuine concern for my well-being. A gentle touch, a whispered promise to check on me later, even a moment of hesitation at the door. Instead, I heard Father's voice, cool and businesslike. Dr. Martinez? We've decided that Elena is in excellent hands here. We won't be maintaining a presence at the hospital, but please keep us updated on any significant changes in her condition. I see, Dr. Martinez replied, and I could hear the disapproval in her voice. And should we continue to list you as emergency contacts? For now, yes. But you should know that Elena has been estranged from the family for some time. She has business partners and friends who are much more involved in her day-to-day life. You might want to reach out to them for any major decisions, Mr. Hartwell. Your daughter is critically injured. Regardless of any family tensions, she needs support right now, and she's getting it, Mother interjected. From trained medical professionals who are far more qualified to help her than we are. That's not the kind of support I meant. Dr. Martinez, Father's voice took on the authoritative tone I remembered from childhood, the one he used when the discussion was over. Elena is an adult who has made it clear that she prefers to handle her own affairs. We're respecting that preference. If her condition changes significantly, we'll reassess our involvement. But for now, we're confident she's receiving the best possible care. Footsteps, then the sound of the door closing. They were gone. I lay there in the darkness behind my closed eyes, processing what had just happened. My parents had visited me exactly once during the most serious medical crisis of my life, spent that visit discussing whether I was worth the inconvenience of their concern, and then left with no intention of returning, but somehow I wasn't surprised. This was exactly who they had always been. The only difference was that my unconscious state had stripped away their need to maintain pretenses. They had finally said out loud what they had communicated through actions my entire life. I was not worth the same love, care, and sacrifice they would give to Victoria. The next few days passed in a haze of medical procedures and gradually increasing consciousness. Dr. Martinez was true to her word. She reduced the sedation gradually, monitoring my brain activity and responses. I began to regain control of my body slowly, first squeezing fingers when asked, then opening my eyes, then finally having the breathing tube removed. Elena, Dr. Martinez said when I could finally focus on her face, can you hear me? Can you understand what I'm saying? I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube. She gave me ice chips and waited patiently while I found my voice. Yes, I finally croaked. I can understand. Excellent. How are you feeling? Any pain? Everything hurt, but my mind felt clear, sore, but aware. I remember things. What do you remember? The accident, the truck running the light, and I hesitated, then decided there was no point in protecting them anymore. I remember my parents' visit. I could hear everything. Dr. Martinez's expression grew troubled. Elena, I need to tell you something about your emergency contacts. They're gone, aren't they? She nodded slowly. They've asked not to be notified of routine updates. They said you prefer to handle your own affairs and that your business associates should be contacted for any major decisions. Did you contact my business associates? We tried, but we didn't have contact information for anyone except your parents. Do you have someone we can call? Someone who should know about your condition? I gave her Marcus's number and my business partner Sarah's contact information. Within hours, my hospital room was filled with flowers, cards, and genuine concern from people who actually cared about my well-being. Marcus barely left my side for the next week. Sarah handled all the business decisions that needed immediate attention and hired a private nurse to supplement the hospital staff. My assistant, Jennifer, coordinated with my doctors to make sure I had everything I needed for recovery. Your parents, Marcus said carefully one evening as I was working through physical therapy exercises. Sarah tried to call them to let them know you were awake and recovering well. They didn't return her calls. I'm not surprised, Elena. Marcus sat down beside my hospital bed. What happened when they were here? You've been different since you woke up. Angrier, I told him everything. About hearing their conversation, about their decision to abandon me, about the calculated way they had discussed my potential disability as an inconvenience to be avoided. Marcus listened in stunned silence. That's not parental love, he said finally. That's not even basic human decency. No, I agreed. It's not, but it's exactly who they've always been. I just finally heard them say it out loud. Recovery was slow but steady. After 2 weeks in the hospital, I was transferred to a rehabilitation facility to work on regaining full motor function and dealing with some lingering cognitive effects from the brain injury. The facility was beautiful, expensive, and far more comfortable than a hospital room. It was there. 3 weeks after the accident, the Victoria finally appeared. I was in a physical therapy session, working on balance exercises, when I saw her. Through the window of the therapy room, she was at the front desk, talking animatedly with the receptionist, clearly frustrated about something. Elena, my physical therapist said, someone's here to see you. Should we take a break? Victoria entered the therapy room like a force of nature, blonde hair perfectly styled despite her obvious rush, designer coat over scrubs, the kind of effortless beauty that had always made me feel invisible by comparison. Elena, she breathed, and to my surprise, her eyes filled with tears. Oh my God, look at you. I was still using a walker, still had visible bruising on my face, still wore the kind of loose clothing that accommodated various braces and bandages. I looked exactly like what I was. Someone who had barely survived a horrific accident. Hello, Victoria. She crossed the room and, to my shock, wrapped me in a careful hug. I just found out what happened to you, just found out. I pulled back to look at her. The accident was 3 weeks ago. I know, and I'm so sorry. Mom and Dad told me you were in an accident, but they said you were fine, that you were recovering well and didn't want visitors. They said you specifically asked not to be disturbed. The lie was so perfectly crafted, so exactly what they would say to keep Victoria away while maintaining their own innocence. Of course, I wouldn't want visitors. It fit perfectly with their narrative of me as the difficult, independent daughter who rejected family support, and you believed them. Victoria's face crumpled. I should have questioned it. I should have called the hospital myself, should have come anyway. But I've been working 100-hour weeks, and when they said you were okay, she trailed off. Then her expression hardened. Elena, what really happened? Because your business partner Sarah called me yesterday, and what she told me is very different from what Mom and Dad said. I looked at my physical therapist, who was pretending to reorganize equipment while obviously listening to every word. Can we have some privacy? Of course. Take your time. When we were alone, I told Victoria everything about waking up during my parents' conversation, about their decision to abandon me, about their lies to her about my condition and recovery. Victoria listened in growing horror, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that looked like recognition. They really said that? She whispered. They really called you a burden? Verbatim, Elena, I swear to you, I had no idea. If I had known how serious this was, If I had known they weren't here supporting you, would you have come? Of course I would have come. You're my sister. The word hit me with unexpected force. Sister. Growing up, Victoria had been the golden child, the one who got the love I craved, the one whose achievements were celebrated while mine were dismissed. But sitting there in that rehabilitation facility, seeing genuine distress in her eyes, I realized that whatever our parents' failures, Victoria herself had never been deliberately cruel to me. I need to ask you something, I said carefully. Growing up, did you know they treated us differently? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I knew you were more serious than me, more driven. I always assumed it was just personality differences. That's not what I meant, she sighed. Yes, I knew they were easier on me. I knew they expected less from me and celebrated more. I told myself it was because you were older, more capable. Because you didn't seem to need as much attention. I needed attention, Victoria. I just learned early that I wasn't going to get it, so I stopped asking. I know that now, she said quietly. I've known it for a while actually. As I got older, started paying more attention, I could see the patterns. The way they'd dismiss your accomplishments while making a big deal about mine. The way they'd criticize you for things they'd excuse in me, but you never said anything. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Mom and Dad, stop loving me so much. I was young and selfish, and I liked being the favorite. I didn't want to examine it too closely because I was afraid of what I might find. Her honesty was painful but refreshing. At least she wasn't pretending our childhood had been equal. Victoria, can I ask you something else? Have you ever wondered why we look so different? Why I don't look like anyone else in the family? She studied my face carefully. You think you're adopted. I know I'm adopted. Grandma Rose told me years ago. My biological mother was Mom's sister Sarah. Sarah, Victoria's eyes widened. The sister who died in a car accident when we were babies. You knew about her? Mom mentioned her a few times when I was little. She said Sarah was wild and irresponsible, that her death was probably inevitable given how recklessly she lived. Victoria paused. She was your mother? Yes. And apparently, Mom and Dad found out she was pregnant with you right after they took me in. Suddenly, they had 2 babies instead of 1, and only one felt truly theirs. That explains so much, Victoria said softly. The way they talk about my baby pictures, my first steps, my first words. They never talked about your early milestones the same way. Because they weren't there for them. By the time they got me, I was already 6 months old. They missed all the firsts that make parents bond with babies. We sat in silence for a moment, processing the implications of this revelation. Elena, Victoria said finally, I want you to know that I don't think of you as my half-sister or stepsister or anything like that. You're just my sister. You've always been my sister, even though your parents love you more. They're your parents too, whether they act like it or not. And yes, they love me more, but that's their failure, not yours. It doesn't say anything about your worth or your place in our family. Our family, I repeated. That's an interesting way to put it, considering our parents abandoned me to die alone. Victoria's face hardened with determination. That's exactly why we need to make sure they face consequences for what they've done. Elena, do you know about Grandma Rose's will? I shook my head. She died 2 years ago. I was at the funeral. But there was never any discussion about inheritance. That's because Mom and Dad have been handling her estate. But here's what they don't know. Grandma Rose updated her will 6 months before she died. She left her Manhattan brownstone and the majority of her assets to you. The room seemed to spin. What? She called me the night before she went to the lawyer. She said she'd watched Mom and Dad treat you unfairly your entire life, and she wanted to make sure you were taken care of. The brownstone alone is worth $8 million, plus there's about $3 million in various accounts and investments. Why didn't I know about this? Because the will specified that you only inherit if you're alive and mentally competent on your 30th birthday. If something happens to you before then, everything goes to the family in equal shares. Mom and Dad have been counting on that inheritance, Elena. They've been talking about selling the brownstone to fund their retirement. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. They wanted me to die or remain permanently incapacitated. Either way, they get the money. Victoria's voice was ice cold. Elena, when they visited you in the hospital, what exactly did they say about your business? I thought back to that terrible conversation. They were asking about who had authority to make decisions for SecureLink while I was unconscious. They seemed very interested in the legal aspects. Did they ask about your personal will? Your own assets? Not directly, but I paused, remembering. They asked Dr. Martinez about decision-making authority. About my affairs, my assets. Victoria pulled out her phone. I need to make some calls. Elena, I think they've been busier than we realized while you've been recovering. Over the next few hours, Victoria orchestrated a series of calls that revealed the full scope of our parents' betrayal. They had contacted my business partners, claiming to be concerned about my condition and the future of SecureLink. They had suggested that, given my traumatic brain injury, it might be wise to consider selling the company or bringing in outside management. More damaging, they had visited my attorney, claiming they were acting on my behalf due to my incapacitation. They had requested copies of my will and information about my assets, ostensibly to ensure proper care for me during my recovery. They're positioning themselves to take control, Victoria said grimly. If they can prove you're mentally incompetent due to the brain injury, they can petition for guardianship. Once they have that, they control everything: your business, your personal assets, and most importantly, whether you're competent to inherit from Grandma Rose. But I'm clearly recovering well. The doctors say my cognitive function is nearly back to normal. That's why we need to act fast. Tomorrow is visiting day at their country club. They'll be there for their weekly tennis game and lunch, playing the role of concerned parents whose daughter is tragically incapacitated. What are you suggesting? Victoria's smile was sharp and calculating, an expression I'd never seen on her face before, but one that looked remarkably like our father when he was closing a business deal. I'm suggesting we give them the surprise of their lives. The next day, Victoria drove me to the Fairfield Country Club in her BMW. I was still using a cane for stability, and the visible remnants of my injuries, fading bruises, careful movements would actually work in our favor. Are you sure you're up for this? Victoria asked as we pulled into the circular drive. I've been preparing for this confrontation my entire life, I replied. I just didn't know it. We found them exactly where Victoria predicted, on the terrace overlooking the golf course, having lunch with the Weatherbys and the Morgans, two other prominent families who had been part of their social circle for decades. The look on Catherine's face when she saw us approaching was worth every moment of pain I'd endured. Pure shock, followed quickly by panic as she calculated the implications of my unexpected appearance. Elena, David stood quickly, his voice carrying just the right note of surprised delight for their audience. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Should you be out of the facility so soon? Hello, Father, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the terrace. Several other diners turned to look. Mother, I thought it was time we had a family conversation. Of course, darling, Catherine said, recovering quickly. But perhaps we should do this privately. Oh, I think our friends would be interested in hearing this, I interrupted, settling into an empty chair at their table. Victoria sat beside me, her presence both supportive and strategically significant. After all, you've been telling everyone about my condition, haven't you? About how tragically incapacitated I am. The Weatherbys and Morgans exchanged glances, sensing drama but not yet understanding its nature. Elena, you've been through a terrible ordeal, David said carefully. Perhaps you're not thinking clearly. My thinking is perfectly clear, Dad. In fact, it's clearer than it's ever been. You see, I remember everything from my hospital stay, including your visit. Catherine's fork clattered against her plate. Elena, you were unconscious, was I? I smiled pleasantly. That's interesting, because I distinctly remember you and Dad discussing whether I was worth the inconvenience of your care. I remember you calling me a burden. I remember you deciding that my potential disability was not your problem. The silence on the terrace was deafening. Helen Weatherby's mouth had fallen open. Robert Morgan was staring at David with undisguised shock. Elena, David's voice was low, warning. I think you're confused. The brain injury that you hoped would either kill me or leave me permanently incapacitated? I kept my voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. Tell me, Dad, how disappointed were you when you found out I was going to make a full recovery? That's enough, Catherine hissed. Oh, we're just getting started, Mother. I turned to address the table at large. You see, my parents have been very busy while I was recovering. They've been telling everyone that I'm mentally incompetent, trying to gain control of my business and my assets. What they didn't count on was me finding out about Grandma Rose's will. David went pale. What about Grandma Rose's will? You know exactly what about the will, Dad. The part where she left me her brownstone and the majority of her estate, contingent on me being alive and competent on my 30th birthday. Which, by the way, is next month. Victoria leaned forward, her voice sweet but deadly. Elena, tell everyone what Mom and Dad didn't know about Grandma Rose's will. Well, I said, enjoying the way our parents seemed to be shrinking in their chairs. What they didn't know is that Grandma Rose was very specific about what would happen if anyone in the family tried to harm me or interfere with my inheritance. She included a clause that if any family member attempted to have me declared incompetent for financial gain, or if anyone tried to isolate me from medical care, they would be completely disinherited from any remaining assets. It was a lie, but a beautiful one, and watching David's face turn ashen made it worth the deception. She also, Victoria added smoothly, hired a private investigator to document any such attempts. The investigator has been watching the family since Elena's accident. Another lie, but the fear in our parents' eyes was delicious. So, I continued, imagine my surprise when I discovered that you've been visiting my attorney, trying to access my will, that you've been contacting my business partners, suggesting I'm unfit to run my own company, that you lied to Victoria about my condition to keep her away from the hospital. Helen Weatherby finally found her voice. Catherine, is this true? Elena is clearly confused, Catherine said desperately. The brain injury has left me with perfect recall of your visit to my hospital room. I finished. Would you like me to repeat, word for word, what you said about me being a vegetable? About how I was never really your daughter anyway? The silence stretched until Robert Morgan cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should give you folks some privacy. Please stay, Victoria said quickly. I think everyone should hear this. Elena, tell them what Mom and Dad said about your adoption. I had intended to keep that private, but the opportunity was too perfect. Well, since we're sharing family secrets, you should all know that I'm adopted. My biological mother was Catherine's sister Sarah, who died when I was a baby. Catherine and David took me in, but they never really considered me their daughter. And when Victoria was born 3 months later, I became redundant. The scandal was spreading across the terrace like wildfire. I could see other diners straining to listen, phones being discreetly pulled out to capture the drama. 30 years, I continued, my voice gaining strength. 30 years of trying to earn love that was never going to be given. 30 years of watching them celebrate Victoria's smallest achievements while dismissing my largest ones. 30 years of being the perfect daughter to parents who saw me as an obligation. Elena, please, David said desperately. You're making a scene, am I? I stood, steadying myself with my cane. Because I thought I was finally telling the truth about who you really are, about what you really think of me, about the fact that you abandoned your daughter to die alone because taking care of me might be inconvenient. Catherine was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of humiliation at being exposed in front of their social circle. But here's the thing, I said, looking around the terrace at all the shocked faces. I don't need your love anymore. I don't need your approval. I survived your abandonment. I'm inheriting Grandma Rose's estate, and I have a family now, Marcus, my business partners, my friends, and Victoria. People who actually care about me. I turned back to David and Catherine. So consider this my official notice that you are no longer part of my life. Don't call, don't visit, don't contact my doctors or my lawyers or my business partners. As far as I'm concerned, you are strangers who happened to raise me, and even that was done reluctantly. Elena, Catherine whispered. You can't mean this. I've never meant anything more in my life. I looked at her directly. You said I was never really your daughter. Well, congratulations, you're finally right about something. I'm not your daughter. I'm Sarah's daughter, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Victoria stood and took my arm supportively. Elena, are you ready to go? More than ready. As we walked away from the table, I could hear the explosion of whispers and shocked conversations erupting behind us. By evening, the story would be all over Greenwich society. The perfect Hartwell family would be revealed as a facade, and David and Catherine would be social pariahs. But the best part was yet to come. 2 weeks later, on my 30th birthday, I inherited Grandma Rose's brownstone and her entire estate. The will reading was attended by the family lawyer, myself, Victoria, and notably absent David and Catherine, who had been explicitly disinherited, under a clause that became active when their abandonment of me became public knowledge. It turned out Grandma Rose really had anticipated their behavior, and she really had included protections in her will. She had also left a letter for me, to be opened on my 30th birthday. My dearest Elena, it read, if you are reading this, it means you have survived whatever hardships David and Catherine put you through, and you have claimed your rightful inheritance. I have always known that they loved you differently than Victoria, and I have spent years hoping they would grow into better parents, but I fear they never will. You are Sarah's daughter, but you are also my granddaughter, and I see so much of your mother in you, her strength, her independence, her refusal to accept less than she deserved. Sarah would be so proud of the woman you've become. The brownstone is yours now, along with all my love and all my hopes for your future. Use it well, and remember that you are worthy of all the love and success you create for yourself. Your devoted grandmother, Rose. I cried reading that letter, the first tears I had shed since the accident. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief and gratitude for the one person in my childhood who had truly seen and valued me. 6 months later, SecureLink Technologies was acquired by a major corporation for $47 million. I kept a small stake and stayed on as a consultant, but I was finally free to pursue other interests. I converted the top floor of Grandma Rose's brownstone into a beautiful apartment for myself and Marcus, who had proposed during my recovery. The rest of the building became a foundation providing support and resources for young people aging out of foster care, kids who, like me, had grown up without unconditional family love. Victoria completed her residency and moved to Boston, but we talk every week now. She's the sister I always wanted but never knew I had until our parents' cruelty finally brought us together. As for David and Catherine, they became exactly what they deserved to become: cautionary tales whispered about at country club luncheons. Their abandonment of me had cost them not only Grandma Rose's inheritance but their social standing and their relationship with Victoria, who refused to speak to them after learning the full truth of my childhood. The last I heard, they were considering selling their Greenwich house to fund their retirement, the retirement they had planned to finance with the inheritance they lost when they chose cruelty over compassion. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about that choice, if they ever regret the words they spoke in my hospital room. But mostly, I don't think about them at all, because I learned something important during those dark days when I lay unconscious. Listening to them decide I wasn't worth their love. Sometimes the family that abandons you does you the greatest favor of all. They free you to find the people who will love you unconditionally, support you through your worst moments, and celebrate your victories without reservation. I spent 29 years trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. Now I spend my days surrounded by people who love me simply because I exist, not because I've achieved something or proven my worth. And that, it turns out, is worth more than all the inheritance money in the world. The perfect family I grew up in was a lie, but the imperfect, chosen family I have now is real. And for the first time in my life, I am genuinely, completely happy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, loving fully, and refusing to let the people who failed you define your worth. I am Sarah's daughter. I am Rose's granddaughter. I am Marcus's fiancée, Victoria's sister, and the founder of an organization that helps kids who were unwanted find their way to people who will want them completely. I am not, and never was, a burden. And David and Catherine Hartwell will spend the rest of their lives knowing that they threw away the most valuable thing they ever had, not my potential inheritance, but my love, because they were too small-hearted to recognize its worth. That knowledge will follow them to their graves, and I will sleep peacefully every night, surrounded by people who chose to love me, in the home my grandmother left me, building a legacy of compassion that stands in stark contrast to the cruelty I survived. That's how you win when your family fails you. You build a better family, live a better life, and become a better person than they ever were. And you never, ever look back.